Honkaistarrail will release the 2.3 update soon, with Jade as the quantum Erudition damage dealer. The question is, can Jade become a meta damage dealer? Or she's just going to be a mid-character like her previous senior where they perform below Herta as the top Erudition? This is the curse of Erudition. Every limited 5-star always stands before Herta. Nobody can beat her in pure fiction. The first thing I can say about Jade is that she's very unique. Jade is the first Erudition character who can apply a status to her teammate, a good and a bad one at the same time. And just like any IPC member, Jade is also a follow-up attack character. But as an Erudition, of course, her specialty is going to be pure fiction, just like any other character on the same path. But you might be wondering, is she going to be a reliable damage dealer in Memory of Chaos too? Let's answer that question soon. In this video, I will analyze Jade's kit based on her pre-release V3 update. So always keep in mind that everything I say is subject to change, meaning the kit that I explain is not a final one. So now let's start with Jade's recent change. I will explain her whole kit and my analysis later in the video. In the newest 2.3 V3 update, Jade got a buff that changed the numbers of her skill and eidolon 1. Her skill deals higher damage with less liability, and her eidolon 1 gives a higher damage increase from her talent and let her gain more stack on less enemies. In simple words, she got buff but not too big. Before we answer whether Jade is OP or mid-level, let's learn about her kit first. As I said earlier, Jade is a unique Erudition character that can implant a status on a teammate. Her skill will give an ally debt collector status and increase their SPD by 30. Allies with debt collector status will have their HP reduced by 2% of their max HP whenever they launch an attack. And at the same time, Jade will also launch a follow-up attack on all enemies. This is the first buff for Jade on the V3 update. The previous one reduced their HP by 5%. That's why there is an argument that she's a potential liability. 5% is just too big for almost any character except Blade, who likes to suffer most of the time. But now, with the recent update, Jade will become a regular AoE damage dealer without any significant downside. A 2% HP reduction can be solved easily by any healer in the game. But still, even though 2% looks small, we can't deny that it won't have any real effect on your party. The main problem is that you need a healer most of the time. If you really want to use preservation, make sure they can heal like Fu Xian. This 2% HP reduction might become a problem on a long battle like Swarm Disaster or Golden Gear, and probably Pure Fiction too, where she should shine the most. If all the downside is what she needed for the 30 SPD buff, it is still worth it. Keep in mind that SPD buff is still very rare in this game. Even in the trio Broken Harmony, only Ruan Mei has the ability to increase SPD. So anything related to it needs to be appreciated. If you apply this buff to follow-up attack DPS characters, it will greatly help them to throw more attacks. More attacks from the ally with Debt Collector result in more attacks on Jade. So, with her skill alone, Jade already has a great synergy. This skill is perfectly designed for her. Her follow-up attack from her skill deals 25% of ATK. This number might be small, but it is still understandable since it has an AoE target. But unlike Robin, who built in with massive fixed critical rate and critical damage, this skill doesn't have that. So if you're lucky enough with your relic farming, the potential can become much higher since she also has a built-in critical damage of up to 100% from her talent. If you have Ruan Mei, you will understand why she is very strong. One of the reasons is that her skill counts from herself. So no matter how fast your teammate is and how slow Ruan Mei is, the buff can always reach its maximum potential. Jade also has this mechanic. Her debt collector status counts from herself, so you don't need to worry about speed tuning your characters when playing Jade. Also, when the debt collector is still active, you can't use it on another ally. So it's important to choose an ally that synergizes with Jade. Jade's ultimate, like any other Erudition character in the game, deals damage to all enemies. What differs is that it also increases her follow-up attack damage from her talent. So, before talking any further about her ultimate, let's talk about her talent first. Jade's talent is the main source of her damage. You will see her most consistent big number from her talent. This part is what makes Jade a potential challenger for Herta as the best AoE damage dealer, especially in follow-up attacks. Now let me explain her talent first so you can have an idea of what I've said earlier. When an ally including Jade with debt collector attacks, Jade will gain 1 charge for each enemy target attacked. And when the charge reaches 8 stacks, Jade will launch a follow-up attack on all enemies equals to 120% of ATK. So instead of battling with Herta to become the best AoE damage dealer, Jade can partner with Herta to create the strongest team in pure fiction. The main reason is that Herta is also an Erudition unit that excels in dealing consistent damage to all targets. The more targets she attacks, the more charge Jade will gain to launch her own follow-up attack. Before we continue, let me explain Jade's Eidolon 1 first since it gets an update on the 2.3v3 and greatly affects her talent. Her E1 will now increase by 32% damage from her talent, instead of 20%. It is definitely a big buff for her. But unfortunately, there's a massive change in the second effect. Previously, Jade would gain 1 more charge for each enemies get attacked. Now when Jade hits 1/2/3 or more, Jade will gain an extra 2/1/0 charge. Did you see the last charge number? It has no effect anymore when Jade attacks 3 or more targets. Yes, Jade is better in single target, but in AoE where it should be her speciality, she has become worse now. Now let's get back to Jade's talent and see the second part of it. Jade will get 5 stacks of pawned asset when launching her talent follow-up attack. This stack can go to 50 stacks, with each stack can increase her critical damage by 2.4%. In total, you can get more than 100% critical damage. Such a big number, right? It has the same critical value as Jinglu, where she gets a 50% critical rate. The only problem is Jade needs a lot more work to achieve it. So if Jinglu needs more critical damage, Jade needs more critical rate. The goal in playing Jade is to launch her follow-up attack talent as soon as possible. Herta is one of the best choices for her, especially because the debt collector status from Jade's skill can also increase SPD by 30, allowing Herta to launch more attacks. This talent is unique because it acts like a support ability, where you need to depend on another character so much. If the character that gets the buff is not good enough, Jade's talent will struggle. Let's return to Jade's ultimate. This ultimate deals an AoE attack equal to 240% of ATK, and increases her talent's damage by 80% for 2 turns. That's it. Because her ultimate can increase her talent's damage, it will be wiser if you use it as soon as possible, since it will buff all the upcoming damage from her follow-up attack talent. And because it only has 2 turns, making Jade as slow as possible is also a good idea. In total, she has 2 ability that counted from herself, the debt collector status from her skill, and the damage buff from her ultimate. If only you can refill her energy with only 1 skill and 2 basic attacks, I don't think she is a good character to move fast. Especially because DPS unit always prefer ATK more than energy recharge rate planar. Let's move to Jade's technique. Jade's technique create an area where enemies can't attack, and force them to enter the combat simultaneously. Jade also gain 15 stacks of pawned asset. This amount of stack will give you around 35% critical damage. Definitely a worthy technique to activate on any difficult battle. Getting stack earlier is always a good thing to have in any character, especially for a damage dealer. Jade's first trace will give her 1 stack of pawned asset for each incoming enemy. This trace shines the most on pure fiction since there are a dozen of them. Unfortunately, this trace can't really help you in other areas. Also, it will give Jade 3 stacks of pawned asset when the ally with debt collector gets a turn. Again, because of her bonus of 30 SPD to ally, this trace will get its maximum benefit. Her second trace gives her 50% advanced forward. The main reason this trace exists is to let Jade release her skill before your other DPS takes action, and let her play on slow SPD. This is similar to what Robin has, where she needs to release her skill as soon as possible since she doesn't really need to build SPD. Even if only active once per battle, this trace is still very powerful. Jade's third trace. Each stack of pawned asset will give Jade an additional 0.5% ATK. This is another great self-buff ability. This buff will definitely help Jade deal immense damage just like Herta. So that's all Jade's abilities as a quantum erudition character. Before we move to the conclusion, let's discuss her signature light cone first, then her eidolons. Yet Hope is Priceless is the name of Jade's light cone. The first thing I want to say about it, without a doubt, this is the best light cone art in honkaistarrail. They truly understand what they're doing here. Okay, let's get serious now. This light cone will increase crit rate by 16%. Something that Jade really needs the most, and 16% is a very big number for S1 limited light cone. For every 20% crit damage that exceeds 120%, increase follow-up attack damage by 12% and stack up to 4 times. In total, you can receive a 48% follow-up attack damage bonus. Since FUA is Jade's main source of damage, it will help her greatly. After entering the battle or using a basic attack, ultimate and follow-up attack damage will ignore 20% target's def for 2 turns. Another OP ability that's still very rare. Ignoring DEF is always considered a broken ability because of how great the effect is. Jinglu or Acheron with Pella are the 2 examples that show it. Jade's Eidolon 1 got a change in this V3 update. And like I said before, I still do not understand why they chose to nerf the final charge number to 0. She should be able to dish out multiple enemies since she is an Erudition. If there's a thing that really needs a buff, it should be this Eidolon, where they should put back the 1 bonus charge when attacking 3 or more targets. Her second Eidolon, when Jade has 15 stacks of pawned asset, she will gain an 18% critical rate. 15% stacks can easily be obtained by using Jade's technique, since it also gives her the exact same number. An 18% critical rate? This one is definitely a good number to build up her damage. Her fourth Eidolon will let Jade ignore 12% of the enemy's def for 3 turns. Def ignore is always a good thing for any DPS character, but 12% is still not enough to justify the price you need to spend before getting it. This one is only a stepping stone to the last one. The last Eidolon is where Jade's true power lies. Jade will also receive debt collector status when there's an ally with it. She also gains 20% quantum residence again. The explanation is very simple, yet very broken. The moment the debt collector users doubled is the moment when Jade can double her follow-up attack consistency, since her main source of damage comes from here. What to pull first between Jade E1 and Light Cone? Considering how good Jade's Light Cone is, I can 100% say you need to pull her Light Cone over Eidolon 1. It's definitely better by miles. First, it helps you to build her since it has a critical rate bonus. Min-maxing her will become much easier. Second, increasing follow-up attack damage and ignoring defense is just too good to pass on. Jade should be able to beat Herta as the best AoE damage dealer in pure fiction. Her kit revolves around long battles with many follow-up attack damage. A great combo to become the pure fiction slayer. With the 2.3v3 update, her liability where Jade consumes a lot of allies' HP is now drastically reduced to 2% HP per attack, letting her be less dependent on a real healer, and giving her a chance to play with preservation like Fu Xian, who has a mini healer and 10% critical rate that benefits her greatly, or a Venturan who is also an IPC member and FUA sustainer. I'm not really sure, but now she might even be able to play with pseudo-sustainers like Welt or Rua Mei with their turn debuff ability. So, is Jade an OP and a broken character? Yes, anyone who has the possibility to dethrone Herta as the best damage dealer in pure fiction is definitely an OP character. But in Memory of Chaos, no, I don't see any potential for her to shine.